I was picking up my little sister from school when the principal stepped in front of me and said, "She told us everything, and you are not taking her anywhere." I had no idea what she was talking about, but her face told me this wasn't some small misunderstanding. She led me inside to the front office where my sister Aspen was sitting in a chair with her sleeves rolled up, and I could see bruises all over her arms that I had never seen before. The principal crossed her arms and said, "During gym class, her sleeve came up and her teacher saw the marks all over her. When she asked your sister what happened, Aspen told her that you did this to her." I felt my entire body go numb as I turned to Aspen and said, "What are you talking about? I never touched you." But she wouldn't even look at me. When I said her name, she flinched like I was about to hit her right there in the office. The principal stepped between us and said, "We've already contacted CPS and the police are on their way, so I suggest you sit down and don't say another word to her." I tried to explain that this was insane and that I would never hurt my sister, but she just pointed to a chair and said, "Sit now." My parents were being called, and I realized that in about 20 minutes my entire life was going to be over because my 7-year-old sister had just accused me of beating her. The police showed up before my parents did, and they separated me into a different room where an officer sat across from me and said, "We're going to ask you some questions and I need you to be completely honest with us." I could hear my mom screaming in the hallway asking, "What is going on? Where are my children? Someone needs to tell me what is happening right now." When they finally let her see me, she stopped in the doorway and looked at me like I was a complete stranger. She didn't hug me or ask if I was okay, and she just kept staring at my hands like she was trying to imagine them hurting Aspen. My dad couldn't even make eye contact because he was already ashamed of me. The officer came back in and told my parents, "Based on the bruising and your daughter's statement, we're opening a formal investigation, and your son is not allowed to return home until we complete our assessment." My mom let out this horrible sob, and my dad just nodded and said, "We understand," like he had already made up his mind about what kind of person I was. They brought in a child psychologist to speak with Aspen privately, and I sat in that cold office for almost 2 hours, staring at the wall, knowing that whatever came out of my sister's mouth was going to determine whether I had a future or not. I kept replaying every single interaction we'd had over the past few months, trying to figure out why she would do this to me, but nothing made sense because I had never once laid a hand on her. Other teachers kept walking by the office and whispering to each other while staring at me, and I overheard one of them say, "I knew something was wrong because that poor girl has been coming to school upset for weeks and nobody did anything." When the psychologist finally came out of the room, I searched her face desperately for any sign that this nightmare was about to end, but she looked absolutely devastated, like she had just heard the worst thing imaginable. She walked straight over to the police officer and in a voice barely above a whisper said, "We need to call more units immediately because there are other children involved, and this is much bigger than we thought." Every single person in that office turned to look at me, and I felt the air leave my lungs because I was convinced she had somehow gotten Aspen to say that I had hurt other kids too, and that I was about to be arrested for crimes I never even committed. But then the psychologist turned to the principal and said, "I need you to pull up the records for 3 6th grade girls right now because Aspen just told me everything." She explained that a group of older girls had been cornering my sister in the bathroom and behind the gym for the past 2 months, beating her and threatening her into silence. The psychologist looked at the officer and said, "These girls told Aspen that if she ever said a single word, they would make sure she regretted ever being born, and that nobody would believe some stupid little 2nd grader anyway." Aspen had been so completely terrified of these girls that when her teacher asked about the bruises, she panicked and blurted out my name because it was the first thing that came to her mind, and blaming me meant she would never have to face her real abusers. Those 3 girls were expelled and ended up facing juvenile charges for what they did to my sister. About a month later, Aspen walked into my room and wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know what else to say. I was so scared." I held her tight and told her, "You weren't trying to hurt me. You just didn't know how to ask for help."